right, folks, one of the issues that has not come up in most of these debates is jobs. Isn't it amazing? We've got a serious issue when it comes to the economy, but the issue of jobs. And the fact of the matter is, when you look at what's happening in this country, black women are growing business at a faster rate than, starting business at a faster rate than anybody else. But the issue that still exists, and that is, what can you do to grow more minority-owned businesses in this country? That's a significant impact. Let me look at the graphic there. Some $400 billion in annual revenue when it comes to minority businesses, $49 billion in tax revenue generated, 2.25 million jobs created. Now, there are about 1.9 to 2 million black-owned businesses in this country. And Dr. Ron Busby often talks about this here with Black Chambers, Inc. He says that if every black business in America was able to increase their capacity and just hire one more worker, you literally can wipe out black unemployment in the country. Joining us right now, Josette Wright-Lacey, President of the National Minority Supplier Development Council, which works to increase opportunities for minority businesses. And, of course, we're still joined by our panel, Jason, Dina, Steve, as well as Avis. So I got to ask you this question here. Is it disappointing to you to watch these debates and literally hear nothing about job creation, small businesses, and especially as it relates to minorities?
Absolutely. Very concerning, because we know that minority businesses are a factor in job growth, significant job growth. So not talking about jobs when it comes to minority communities which are at risk, which have higher rates of unemployment, lower rates of education, using jobs as a way to get us beyond that, they're not talking about it, and it is very disturbing. And
what amazes to me, you would think that Donald Trump would see that as an issue, even when he has gone to talk to African Americans, which is very rare. He's talking about law and order, and I'm going, that's not going to resonate with the black people. You might want to bring up small businesses. You might want to bring up jobs.
Well, the issue is nobody really knows what to do with it. They don't really know how to handle that. How do you really create jobs in African American, Hispanic, and Native American communities? You do it through entrepreneurship, which means corporate America is going to have to do its part, the government's going to have to do its part, and private citizens are going to have to do their part.
Steve, why is this not an issue? Why? I mean, I don't understand.
I disagree with the premise that it hasn't been an issue.
Have you heard it?
Yes, I have, and I'll tell you where I've heard it. First of all, in order to have entrepreneurship, you need to have education. That's the key. If you look at unemployment rates of people that have college degrees versus high school degrees, Donald Trump has talked about using vouchers. In my state, for example, we use charter schools like the KIPP Academy, like Yes, that are doing very well.
Okay,
he's also, let me finish on. He's also talked about having enterprise zones, the types that Jack Kemp promoted, and that's part of his plan. So he has talked about that.
Go ahead.
I haven't heard that. Now, I have to say that I was on a conference call with Hillary Clinton, where she was actually talking about small businesses and how to bring minorities and small businesses more to the forefront in terms of job creation. I've not been invited to any conference calls with Mr. Trump or anyone on his team about what we can do to really leverage the power of minority business.
Here's my whole point about the education point. That's actually for somebody who's going to launch a business 6, 8, 10 years from now. I'm talking about the folks right now who have businesses. And what I'm saying is, this is, to me, is something that, and one of the reasons you're not going to hear it come up in the debates, Jason, is because the people who are asking the questions, it's not like that's actually on their radar either. So it's kind of like, whatever.
No, they're not thinking about the number of minorities that are starting business. They're certainly not thinking about minority women. They're certainly not thinking about the difficulties in getting SBA loans and how that applies to what people are trying to do. But I think the biggest issue is this, and this is something I think is applicable to both candidates, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Donald Trump should be able to blow her out of the water on this issue. He should be able to, after years of business, have a resume, a long list of people that he has supported, small donors, small vendors, and he doesn't seem to have that. And he's got a bunch of people he's stiff.
Black businesses, construction, things along those lines.
Yeah.
What would you like? First of all, we got a couple more debates left. So when it comes to this issue, what do you want to hear?
I want to hear someone talk about an agenda for supporting minority business. I want someone to come up and say that U.S. policy should be based upon growing those businesses, making access to capital not so much of a barrier to growth in minority businesses. I want to hear people talk about enterprise zones that are really easy to figure out. I want to hear someone talk about SBA loans being easier to access. I want to hear someone talk about an office that really focuses on minority businesses and funding it. We partner a lot with the Minority Business Development Agency out of the Department of Commerce. Their funding is cut every time you turn around. She can't do her job if she does not have the funding to do the research, to find out the impact. We generate $1 billion in economic output every day, minority businesses every single day. Where's that money going? We need to study that. You need money to study that. If you're not funding those policies, you're really setting minority business back. That is the key to the economic prosperity, not just of the minority business community, not just of the minority communities, but the U.S. economy. We're going to have markets where people can participate in the economy. You can't do that if you don't have a job. You need a job to spend money. And corporate America is not creating jobs. We have not even gotten back to pre-recession levels. They're not ever going to be back to those levels. They're going to be doing more outsourcing. Government's going to be using private contractors. If minority businesses are not a part of that equation, 20 years from now, when the majority of the people in this country are going to be tan, at least tan, how are they going to spend money if they have no jobs?
Dina, when you hear this discussion about law and order, about what's happening in black communities, and you hear Trump cites these numbers, but also you hear Clinton talk about it, the bottom line is here, as John Hope Bryant said. He said, you've never seen a riot in a community with a credit score of 700 or above.
Correct.
And so the bottom line is, if you want to talk about what's happening with crime, with shootings, you want to talk about what's happening with poverty, you have to deal with small businesses, because 65% of all jobs in America come from small businesses.
Small businesses. I agree, and I think that as a small business owner, I want them to talk, both candidates to talk more about jobs. But I think you've just said that in this economy, we haven't moved beyond pre-recession job growth. And so my question is... In corporate America. Okay, so, but my question is, do we want to turn the keys over to the team that hasn't produced the job growth, or do we want to turn it over to a new team of people like Donald Trump, who has the experience in creating jobs? And I think that, you know, Hillary Clinton, as much as she has in terms of 25 years of experience in public office, she really doesn't have experience in creating jobs. And even if you say, wait 1 second, even if you say Donald Trump got $1 million, or however much he got from his father, that is a lot of money.
Actually, he got $1 million from his father, and he got about $14 million in loans. But he claims that he actually made it possible by himself.
Go ahead. Whatever the number is, if it's 20 million, I recognize that I certainly couldn't get couldn't get $20 million from my dad or a bank.
Couldn't get 20,000.
Exactly. Right. But we have someone who understands business and who understands the economy and economic growth in a way that Hillary Clinton doesn't. She has, in the last $200 million she's earned speaking. She's created her wealth by speaking.
Well, hold on 1 second. Jose, go ahead.
So at the beginning of this segment, it showed the number of jobs that minority-owned businesses created. That was 1 year. 22 million jobs during the Obama administration. So whoever's in office, minority business is going to continue to do what it does. And if it can partner with our corporate members, if it can partner with government, they will create jobs. The question is, who's going to create the corporate jobs? Corporate jobs are not coming back. That's it. It's a wrap. Everything is going to small business.
Avis, Steve, 1 second, Avis.
And I just have to say, this is absolutely a critical issue. And I do also have to say that it creates an avenue for people to be able to create jobs that necessarily might not have access to education. Let me just say, my father, a former sharecropper, third-grade education, built a business where he employed over 24 individuals, was very, very successful, 40 years, okay? So this is the pathway out of poverty, I believe, for a number of African Americans.
Hire other minorities. So they're not going out just hiring people that are white people that have jobs. They're going out looking in at-risk communities. They're taking chances on people that are unemployed. They're taking chances on people that have been incarcerated. They're taking chances on people who have no education.
Roland, there's a bigger, broader problem. We have very slow economic growth. We're between 1 and 1.5%. I want you to think about something. When Bill Clinton ran for president, he said it was the economy, stupid, and he said that George Herbert Walker Bush had a terrible economy. You know what the growth rate was in the last quarter of George Herbert Walker Bush being president? 4.8%. The quarter before it was 3.8%.
George W.
When Ronald Reagan, I'm talking about that. Ronald Reagan, when he was president, had a quarter with over 9% growth. He had 4 other quarters with 8% growth. He had an overall of 4.4% growth, and that's misleading because the first part was in a recession. You cannot create jobs, you cannot create businesses if we're going to have a slow 1.5%, 2% growth rate.
But here's what you did not say that is also a reality. What you did not say is that you did not have the level of automation then that you do now. You did not have the level of technology then that you do now. You also had cheap credit then that you do now. And the reason Steve, the reason our economy crashed in 2008 was because of that cheap credit. The reality is we lived in economic lie for 30 years. We had Americans who were living so far above their means, and when check was due, all of a sudden it came down. One second. 2013, you had $23.09 billion in small business loans that were handed out. African Americans got about 385 or so million of that. One of the reasons was because of the home foreclosure crisis. Because for African Americans, if you don't have collateral, if you no home, no loan, no business. And so part of this whole issue when you talk about economic growth is also based upon what are the other factors. What global recession, also what happens there. So the question I have for Josette again.
But Roland, let me address something on that. Interest rates were much higher in the 80s and 90s.
I'm not talking about interest rates.
You're talking about the cost of money.
No, what I'm talking about.
We have low interest rate now.
What I'm talking about is you had individuals who were getting cheap credit who simply didn't have the economic means. And here's what happened.
Not in the 80s. You're talking about George W. Bush.
No,
I was talking about Herbert Walker Bush.
The reason I'm talking about George W. Bush because that's what also what happened.
But those numbers I was talking about.
What happened to those economic years led to the recession she's talking about. And so the reason you had the slow economic growth in the last 8 years because what happened the previous 8 years. You cannot talk about economic growth today comparing it to 30 years ago if you skip over the previous 8 years. And so I'm sorry, that simply will not add up. That's like saying I'm gonna talk about my life growing up and I'm gonna skip over my parents and bring up my grandparents. No, I might want to talk about mama and daddy. So you got to deal with the previous 8 years. So that's why we had the slow economic growth the last 8 years because of the previous 8 years. Last point for you, and that is moving forward. What is the outlook when it comes to that whole point about access to capital? I know with the new head of the SBA, she and I met, some changes have been made. Are we seeing more capital going to minority businesses?
Not yet. I think that we're getting there. They're approving more small business investment companies that can go into the community. The problem is getting into the SBA is very complicated. Navigating through it is even more complicated, and getting a loan on the outside of it is even more complicated. So what we try to do is to put together a group of resources. If you're a small business, you're certified by us, we will help you find that access to capital because that is the #1 barrier to job growth in this country. Has been for over 30 years. 30 years I've been doing this, and 30 years you ask an MBE, so what's the problem? I can't get credit, so I can't add another line. I can't take that extra contract because I can't get the access to capital.
That's what it boils down to. We appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right.